For my book report, I did Joan Brodsky Schur's Eyewitness to the Past. And the main ideas in her book focus on engaging students in the content in their social studies classrooms. And so after 8 years of teaching, she realized that just by conveying information that she thought was really interesting, it wasn't enough to engage her students, and that she needed to change the processes by which students accessed historical information in the classroom. And so as she thought about it and kind of reflected on these ideas, she turned to current events, asking the question, why are changes in government laws and political leaders and foreign policy so interesting and exciting to us now when these contemporary events that are going on are very similar to the topics that bore students in their history classrooms every day. And she realized that it was because there was a problem with the way that these events are portrayed in the classroom, and that because, one, the outcome of these events are already known, two, the controversies that make them so exciting and interesting are taken out a lot of times in the textbook, and third, because the effect that these events had on ordinary everyday people are omitted from the textbook. And so she decided that in order to help students connect with these seemingly boring events, she came up with 6 strategies that help teachers show their students how exciting history can be. And so much like the Café Liberté video that we watched in class, Schur's strategies placed the students into the lives of everyday people who cared what was happening to them in the past just as much as we care about the outcome of current events today. And so Schur, the way that she does this is through primary sources, and she advocates that we use these primary sources as mentor texts to help students create their own journal entries, their own travelogues, their own biographies, their own scrapbooks, to engage them with the past. And she says, quote, "In order for students to make an imaginative leap into the lives of generations long gone, students need to hear the voices of people as witnessed in their letters, their diaries, their newspapers, speeches, and autobiographies. This approach emphasizes the fact that common citizens affected the course of events just as average people today make an impact on history," end quote. And so she does this through her 6 eyewitness strategies. And because I have 6 strategies to discuss and only around 10 minutes, rather than modeling just one of them for you, I've decided to explain each 6 and give examples of how they can be employed in a classroom. So the first strategy that she discusses is diaries from opposing viewpoints. And this strategy, students adopt historical personas and they record a diary after reading several primary source accounts to kind of model how they should do it. And they keep these diaries as they live through a set of events as they unfold in their textbook. And so this strategy is designed to put them in the mindset of how they would feel if they were actually going through these events. So, for example, you could divide the class in half and have one half keep a diary about how they feel about the Civil War from the Northern perspective and how they feel about the Civil War from the Southern perspective. And these diaries are designed to illustrate opposing viewpoints and really create that controversy that's so interesting about history for the students. The second strategy that she discusses are travelogues, and so she calls them eyewitnesses' perspectives of a growing nation. And so after reading several primary source examples, again, of a travelogue, the students can then imagine themselves in the role of a traveler crossing the United States, be an explorer, an immigrant, a conservationist, a speculator, or just a regular pioneer. And they might describe what they see from the perspective of Sacagawea or Zebulon Pike and create drawings and mixed multimedia depictions of what they see as they travel along the trail. The third is letters arguing the past in written correspondence. And so this one is a lot like the written debates assignment that we talked about in History 276. So after reading several primary source examples of a letter, the students can be divided into pairs, and each one takes turns writing letters, creating a correspondence back and forth with each other from a different perspective. So, for example, you could have a parent and a child writing letters back and forth during the Vietnam War, expressing different opinions and viewpoints about the war itself. The fourth are newspapers, and so newspapers are one of the largest primary source reserves that we have access to, and so we can take advantage of this in our classroom by having students examine conflicting accounts of the same event and then replicate this process in our classroom. And so we can explain how language taints public perspective and then practice creating those different viewpoints in our classroom with different perspectives from the newspaper on, again, the Civil War, or even the election of 1800 with Adams and Jefferson. So it's, again, to create this rich controversy and address the different viewpoints that were so widely held in the past and that are widely held in the present today. The fifth strategy is election speeches advocating for your candidate. And so after examining election speeches, you can divide the class in half again and have them take turns writing election speeches for a different candidate. So for example, if you were studying the election between Barry Goldwater and Lyndon B. Johnson, you can have one half of the class write a speech for Lyndon B. Johnson and the other half write a speech for Barry Goldwater and illustrate that controversy that happened in the past. And have them really empathize with the people who supported Barry Goldwater when he lost, or supported Lyndon B. Johnson when he won. And that creates that historical empathy that is so important. The sixth strategy is scrapbooks, documenting the past across time. And I really like this one because, much like the letters or the journal entry, it allows the students to kind of take on the persona of a person in the past and examine how historical effects really affected families, businesses, and individual life. So for example, you could divide the students into groups, each one being a different family, and have them reflect on how European contact influenced a specific Native American tribe in North America. And again, that's to create that rich historical empathy. And really engage the students in the topic that they're studying because they're viewing it from an individual viewpoint. And so these strategies can be mix and match, they can be reversed, they're very flexible. You can do them as a final assessment, or you can do them as throughout the course of your unit. And so they allow you to help your students engage with the history on an individual basis. For example, if I were creating my scope and sequence for U.S. History 1, I could have them do personal diaries during the Revolution, the election debate of 1800 with Adams versus Jefferson, a travelogue describing American life in the 1830s, a letter exchange in the 1850s with a focus on the events leading up to the Civil War, conflicting news accounts of a Civil War battle, and a scrapbook of life during Reconstruction. Just a couple problems that I noticed with Eyewitness to the Past is that Schur is not very democratic when she outlines, when she divides her students. She usually says, okay, you guys are the North, and you guys are the South, or you guys are the parent and you guys are the child during the Vietnam War. And I think that takes a little bit of autonomy away from the students. And so I think that you can create a balance with sometimes assigning and sometimes allowing the students to choose for themselves. Another problem that I noticed, and one that Schur addresses herself, is that Eyewitness to the Past, all these different strategies, they generate a lot of work that needs to be graded and puts a lot of pressure on the teacher. And so I feel like you can kind of balance this by picking and choosing what you just give credit to, what you individually go through and grade, and that can create that can make it a little bit easier on you as the teacher. And so I really loved reading this book. I think that Eyewitness to the Past is a great way to engage your students in your social studies classroom because it allows your students to have a personal connection with the past while simultaneously developing critical thinking, historical empathy, and rigorously engaging with the curriculum. Thank you.